Good evening, I'm Mike Cannici and welcome to Hometown Heroes. And tonight is part 2 of our interview with legendary former Seymour football coach Paul Sponheimer. And coach, it's an honor again. We had so much fun in part 1. I cannot wait to do tonight's episode. I want to thank you for coming on again. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. I could do this all day.
You know, coach, we talked about this towards the end of part 1. You guys did have to leave the Hoosie after the 93 season. So you enter the 94 season, you go in the N.V.L. Right off the bat, you play Ansonia the first game. First question is, difference between the N.V.L. and the Hoosie, what did you find was very different about it?
More of a wide open game, especially, introducing yourself to Ansonia right away.
Right.
They wanted to throw the ball more. Defense was a secondary thought, other than, let's say, at Ansonia and Naugatuck. I found out, through the league, most of them, weren't particular about their defense. That if we could play good defense and have an offense that Kello develops, we'll be fine. And as it went on, our line with DeMarco and our defense. And Kello's offense, we were able to be successful.
Right. Now, first few games, I think you guys started off the year 5-1 or 4-1. I believe the next loss came to a great Naugatuck team in Week 6. They were very good that year, them and Ansonia. So, you were winning right away, but, was there a part of you that, still was missing being in the – and the Hoosie had changed as well that year. They went to – what was called the Southern Connecticut Conference. And although Derby, Lyman Hall, Shelton, Amity, and Cheshire and Sheehan all played their division, gone was North Haven, Brantford, East Haven. What did you miss the Hoosie? Was it disappointing? Or?
You miss it, but you're so involved in what's going on right now. And,
right.
We're the new kid on the block, and we're coming sort of with some past success in what was considered one of the premier leagues in the state. So we want to represent ourselves well in this new league. But yeah, you always, after I looked at the N.V.L. scores, I looked at the Houstonic League scores, even though it
right.
wasn't the Hoosie anymore. I think they had a division that was called the Hoosie and one was called whatever. Probably the biggest thing was now I'm defending the N.V.L. when before
right.
I was one of the leaders of the non-violent league, So, when we had the opportunity to cross over, sometimes I was a very big advocate of, let's do a league crossover, because I found that there was some very good talent in the N.V.L.
Right.
I remember the Ortiz boy.
From Crosby, yes.
From Crosby.
Yep.
I said, I went to a track meet, Mike, to watch him do the hurdles because I watched him run like a deer. Again, he would run up to the front, run 90 degrees, and then down the sideline, touchdown. I went and watched him run the hurdles. I didn't even realize he looked so fast out there.
Right.
That was a big thing in the N.V.L. There was a speed factor also that. Where it was more of a thump, thump, thump in Houstonic, there was some more, whether it was as a wide receiver or a running back that presented different challenges for us.
Right. Now, you gained Ansonia, but the negative side is you lost Derby in the rivalry. That had to be tough, too. I was always upset about that. Derby and Seymour, to me, should
right.
never have stopped playing, and that was disappointing.
Absolutely. And, they talk about Derby and Shelton now. To me, that would be another travesty. If Derby had to give up Shelton or Shelton gave up Derby on Thanksgiving because of some other things. I think the Valley has to understand that, our traditions are rich. The river still runs through here,
right.
and we're still alongside it. And whatever we can still keep, we need to keep for the kids ahead. I'm a firm believer you need to know where you've been in order to know where you can go. And there's too many things that have been lost already, and now we have Derby back, but back that was very hard for me,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
because I mean, to be honest, Derby thumped us a lot of times, and I felt as we went along, Derby started to slide. I'm thinking, well, this would have been a good time to go
Right.
back and give a little payback, because they had been very successful, whether it was Lou or Charlie,
Right.
against us. But you go on, water over the dam.
Right. And I believe the first season in the N.V.L. you guys went 7-3. I think you still played Amity for a few years, and
Yes.
Amity had a real good team that year. They beat you the last game of the year. There were some, tough times the first few years in the league. I know it was a difficult 96 season where you guys lost a lot of players and didn't necessarily have the talent. But by 98, again, another great Seymour team comes in. How frustrating, though, in the beginning was it being in the N.V.L. and not having the success you had hoped for right away?
Again, the success maybe not have been happening on the field, but as we talked earlier in part one, getting them ready for the rest of their lives.
That part was happening.
That was
right.
happening, and those kids that were in my earlier part of my career, and older Wildcats that I might have been an assistant to or might have played, they were always there.
Right.
And the young boys that graduated from college went out and got a job. Those things helped me over some of the losses, knowing that, okay, something good is happening in the program. It might not be a W today, but the past is still all good.
Right. And, I mean, how do you – of course you want to win. You're a competitor and stuff like that. But to you, do you still consider some of your teams to have had great years and not necessarily win a championship? I mean, a couple of teams I think about your 89 team. That was a young team, but yet that team finished strong. They went 6-4, had a great win against Naugatuck, towards the end of the year. And I also think about that 91 team. It started off 0-2, knocked off Derby, ended Derby's winning streak. There were teams like that maybe talent-wise didn't have the best team, but you guys got the most out of them.
Oh yeah, and that tribute to my staff. There was a little saying in the hole of the wall, which is the door going out to the field out there. It said over the top, if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. And as long as we saw people getting better, there was a certain good feeling about it. That good feeling may not have came about on a Friday night or a Saturday with a W, but we as a coaching staff were mature enough to understand we're getting better.
Right.
You always want to win. It's payday. Game day was payday at Seymour. You just worked 5 days getting ready for this. It's payday. Go out and perform. Those people paid to see a good product. Losing, I can probably, out of the losses that happened in my career, I can remember them better
than the wins.
Right. You talked about Lyman Hall in '85. I still remember seeing the interception on a screen pass going in for a touchdown.
Right.
They go on to play in the playoffs, and we sit home. And that's back when there was only 2 teams or 4 teams, going on. But, looking back, success doesn't necessarily wins and losses.
Right. How do you, though, as a coach, are you the type of coach, though, where sometimes you took it home with you because it's, like nothing else. You're working 3 hours a day, plus you're teaching, so, you're probably putting in 12-hour days all the time. And when you go out there and you're not having the success you hope for, is it tough for you as a person to go home and, be able to enjoy the rest of your night? Or
Well, I was going home to a young lady that her father was my first coach. Right. So she grew up in that household that, maybe didn't have success too. So her famous saying, leave it at the door.
Right.
And I had two beautiful young daughters, and so I sort of gotten that mentality. That's why I spent a lot of time at the high school, because when I went home, it wasn't a lot of time, but I wanted to make it quality time.
Right.
And a lot of times those young ladies were asleep by the time I got home. And probably the people that got shortchanged the most during my career were the three women in my life, and my wife and my two daughters, because I didn't shortchange Seymour football.
Right. Now, let's talk about this 98 team. You know, right off the bat, and Darien, I think, had beat Ansonia in the playoffs. So, playoff-wise, that was Ansonia's first loss, you know, at Jarvis Field, as Jack being the coach. But your team in 98 was the first team ever to beat them in the regular season at Jarvis Field with Jack as the head coach. He had never lost there. Right off the bat, you start off with a great win. I believe it was 28-14 maybe, or 21-14.
28-14.
Yeah. Did you think from there this was going to be a special team? I mean, anytime you beat Ansonia.
Yeah. They had that, going back to that word chemistry, they had that chemistry.
Right.
They were their own policemen. They demanded probably more than the coaching staff demanded. There was just a certain pride that they had that I knew was going to be special.
Right.
Didn't know how special. There were a couple kinks that had to come along, and it did. But I think, you know, going back to that first game, and Jack and I, who were the best of friends, he goes, you know, after I called just before half, it was 14-7.
Right.
And he loved a tight end screen. He loved throwing the ball to the tight end and a screen.
Yeah.
And Timmy Sadik, I said, Tim, this, you know, and we had practiced against it. I said, this might be a good time for that. And sure enough, he called the tight end screen. Timmy Sadik picks it off and takes it in. And
right.
And Jack, years later, I should have never thrown that then. I knew that you knew. But yeah, that was the beginning, and it sort of just snowballed. You know, anytime you beat Ansonia, whether it's in the parking lot, you know, momentum is on your side, and it made it, Monday's practice was even easier, knowing that, you know, they felt good about themselves.
Right.
And what could be down the line. Yeah.
Right. I mean, the one fear is always having a letdown, because that could happen sometimes, but it doesn't seem like this team did. I mean, they were focused all year.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
The other thing, too, is your first two state titles, the playoffs weren't the way they are now. You had to play two games to get this championship. That's not
Right.
easy either. Explain that. Do you
Yeah,
like that? Or?
Oh, absolutely. And now you
Yeah.
have to play even
3,
more.
yeah.
But in the same sense, there were so many years up until whenever they started to expand it. We were a 3 or a 4 when they were only taking 2, and
You would have been
sometimes
in a
when
lot
they were
more,
a 4,
yes.
we were the 5. So just being in there, no matter what. But it was strange times as far as a coaching staff. You would play back then on a Tuesday night and then play the following Saturday. Well, on that Tuesday night, you had already made arrangements with both opposing coaches that if they won, where were you going to meet, you know, for the next. And I remember Mike Sangster at Darien. That was the end of his career.
Right.
And he was moving to Arizona the Sunday after the Saturday game, and he goes, I don't want to meet on Tuesday night. I said, you know, I need to film. I said, you're 13-0. I said, you know, I got to get as ready as, and so we didn't meet until the next day, which meant we didn't have the films, because there were some times when we had the semis, you know, you met, and on a Tuesday night, and my staff was there all the way until the next day. So DeMarco's getting done and going up to his classroom, Keller, you know, and we're, you know, the films. So, but it was a great experience. That 98, we had the lights for the first time. We brought the lights in. Berlin came in, had a good team. But again, they weren't Valley tested.
Right.
And by the end of the night, the best thing that Berlin had was the band. Great band. I mean, a phenomenal band. I mean, our people stayed there. In fact, at the time, Tommy Koch had Seymour Lumber. He asked the band, because we didn't have one, he asked the band if we could rent them for Saturday's game.
Right.
But yeah, those were good times.
Right. Now, there's been some teams like we discussed that, were great teams, and you can't always win a state title because, sometimes you just got to give it to the other team. They're
Right.
a little better. I think a team that I remember as well was 2002. You had a great team that year. I believe you guys finished 10-2, if I'm not mistaken. You had Joey Deptula, who was very good. Matt Tursky was a very good running back. You had Jamie Burns on the line, defensive line. That was a really great team, and played a great Pomperog team, if I'm not mistaken, in the freezing cold in the semi game, which was one of the coldest games ever.
Absolutely. I pump gas now in the morning to fill my voids, and people will come in, they'll say, "Geez, it's cold, Coach." And I'll say, "It's not Pomperog cold." I mean, Pomperog cold is Pomperog cold, and yeah, we played them up there. The field was nothing but basically they put it together with asphalt, and we played on it, and we fell behind 14-0 right away, and it was 14-0 the first quarter, and I remember at the end of the quarter they came over to the sidelines, and I said, "The one good thing, fellas, is it's early. We can still come back."
Right.
And we did, and Joey Deptula ran quarterback draw 17 times
Very
that
good
night.
player.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely great player. No one at the quarterback position, to the best of my knowledge, won more games as a quarterback than Joey Deptula did in his career
Really? Wow.
at Seymour. Yeah, and now he's coaching there, as is Jamie Burns. Yeah, I believe we either got beat by New Canaan or Staples.
Staples,
The
yes.
following,
Right.
it was back-to-back years. We got beat by Staples one year and New Canaan.
Right.
We never got to win the championship, but we played in quite a few games there at that time. But that was a very good team. They were a very dedicated team. They weren't overly talented. You mentioned a few people, but as a group,
As a team. Right.
they were a good team, and they did what was necessary in the offseason. And they were another team, you couldn't get them out of the locker room. They just liked each other.
Right.
And knowing Jamie Burns, he could tell stories until the cows come home.
Right.
And those were one of those ones. Chris Hebert, who's now up there as a coach, I mean, come on, go home, fellas. My supper's well overdone.
Right.
But yeah, that was terrible when they all got their licenses. At least when the parents had to pick them up, there was a time they would leave. But they got their license. They didn't care. They were staying and talking.
Right. You mentioned Jamie Burns, and I've known Jamie for a long time, and that's how, I always knew about Seymour football, obviously, but knowing about Paul Sponheimer, I learned everything about you from Jamie Burns, because Jamie would always say that, if it weren't for Coach Sponheimer, I'd be in a lot of trouble. I would not be going to school. I would, be going down the wrong path. He taught me how to be a man. And I've talked to similar players, like that Matt Tursky, a couple others, and it's the same thing all the time. They always say, he was always on me, but there was a purpose to it, and I wouldn't be in college right now if it wasn't for him. Does that mean more to you than going 11-0, knowing that these guys got something out of it, and you taught them how to be men and grow up, to grow up and stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it goes back to, getting them ready for the rest of their lives. If you went 11-0, it'd be over.
Right.
These young men are out there today, hopefully being very successful at what they've decided to do. And hopefully, maybe when that clock goes off and they say, "I don't want to do this," somebody says, "Well, Coach is going to yell." And they get up and they do it, and they get their paycheck at the end of the week. And absolutely, the most I'm proud of anything is what was passed along by my staff, the community, the parents, everybody, to all of the young men, that not necessarily went on to play college football or that even went to college, that they got something out of the program that has helped them somewhere along the line in their life.
Right.
You know, I always told them that, you know, you all can play football in college. First you have to get in, all right? And there's a place for everybody. And we had a lot of kids. And I always believed that, well, I can play Division I. And the hard thing was sit across from us and say, no, you can't. But I know how important the game is for you. So go someplace where you're going to be successful playing the game, and then I know you're going to go back to your dorm room and do your schoolwork,
Right.
because you're not saying, why aren't I playing? So that was also a little bit of the philosophy. And, you know, and as I said, I enjoyed my run at Kentucky and the friends I met and the experiences I had. And for them to go to the Bentleys or the Bryants or the Kings or the Springfields or the AICs was as important as the ones that went to Syracuse or Missouri or Penn State, you know, because they got something out of it, what was necessary.
Right.
And that's the most important, without a doubt.
Right. Now let's talk about this gentleman, because he's been long associated with Seymour sports, especially Seymour football, and a very good friend of yours, John Raven Commune.
John Raven Commune, you know, they got the what do they call that dog up there at UConn?
Yeah, what is it?
The Husky, Jonathan, maybe, or something. There should be a statue up there. I mean, not just football. I mean, he put in 45 years of dedication, commitment, loyalty, accountability. Half of the stats that are out there for these young men who 10 years afterwards they want to know, Coach, is there any stats on me? I want to show my kids. You know, I want to show my little boy what I did. And if it wasn't for John, okay, or the Evening Sentinel, or a combination of the Lyme Katzmans of the world, there would be nothing to pass on. And John did it for everything. He did it for football. He did it for basketball. He did it for baseball. And he served every coach but Janenda at Seymour. I mean, he did Gesick. He did Heffernan. He did Sponheimer.
Wow,
he did
crazy.
Lennon. You know, he did basketball coaches I didn't even know we had. You know, he was there, went to school together. Johnny used to be first time I met Johnny, he was playing Biddy Basketball All-Stars. He could shoot a basketball. Couldn't run much, but he could shoot a basketball. And we've been friends ever since. I mean, high school, we called him Shoebrush. You know, and him and Coach Gesick hit it off, and they were quite a team together. And what he's done for all of athletics at Seymour should be well documented, you know. And we just honored him in the Hall of Fame as much as we can. There's an award given at the Ansonia Seymour game in his name, and all well deserved.
Right.
Yeah.
And big part of your life, I'm sure, too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Santa Claus for my two daughters. You know, it still comes up every Christmas Eve. You know, we have a little more than soda, but you know, he was there for my family the whole time too.
Yeah, and you could tell he really loved, you know, the program and everything about it. I mean, he cherished those moments as much as anybody did.
Yeah. He probably cried more than I did a lot of the times, you know. Very emotional young man. And still, you know, we'll still get to games, you know. And he's involved with the New Haven Football Foundation, and you know, he keeps an active hand.
You know, people don't realize either that's a lot of work to do, keeping stats and doing all that stuff. You know, that's not easy to do. It looks easy, but it's not.
No, absolutely not. And he was there, rain, snow, sleet, you know. Yeah. He was there, you know. And absolutely. And like I said, the kids appreciated it more than ever, you know.
Right.
And he was Coach Commune. He wasn't, you know,
Statistician.
statistician.
Right.
He was Coach Commune, and
I think that's
yeah.
wonderful.
And hopefully it meant as much to him as it meant to us having him do what he did for 45 years.
That's I mean, that's half his life, you know.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Good majority of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah. No, well deserved, and I'm glad you mentioned him.
Right.
I'm glad you brought him up.
Now let me ask you this. It's hard 29 years, it'd be impossible for one thing to stand out, but was there ever, it doesn't necessarily have to even be a state title game or a, you know, Whoosy title game, but is there anything that stands out, one win where you were like, wow, that one meant the most to me? Maybe because you didn't have the most talent, or because you had a lot of talent and the pressure to win that game was big. I mean, one particular that stands out?
And maybe because it's fairly recent, it was in 2007 or 2008, one of my last 2 years, and we were playing Sacred Heart at Municipal Stadium.
Right.
And it was early in the game, so Mike Olszewski was still in the game. And he made a run down our sideline. And Mike was a boy that seemed to enjoy running over people instead of around people.
Right.
And in this game, he probably ran over 7 people on the way. He didn't get in the end zone. He got knocked out of bounds right at the end, only because he wanted to run into the kid. Otherwise, he could have got in.
Right.
But as I looked down the sideline, because it was on our sideline, Mike, I said, the only thing that reminds me of is a car that went up on a sidewalk and ran over pedestrians. But that stands out. There's been so many great, you know, things, and just little things that kids say to you. You know, I don't know who that person was. You know, kids say the darndest things.
Yeah.
Well, it goes right along. I lived it. But all good memories. But I think probably the most proud I am of anything that is what the young men that we were able to coach, and I say we, meaning my staff, were able to coach how they're doing in life right now.
Right. Now, we talked about rivalries before, Derby, Ansonia, Seymour, Derby. You know, you can even go as far as to say Hill House, Wilbur Cross. That's a big rivalry. Mm-hmm. A rivalry that I think is one of the best, and it started in 2003 on Thanksgiving Eve, was Woodland and Seymour. Talk to me about what that rivalry has meant, and, you know, really when you watch these two teams play, you could tell, like, they definitely want to win that game more than anything.
Absolutely, and you know, it's something that I hope will continue on. There's talk out there that, you know, Woodland doesn't believe that it's a rivalry, not necessarily the players, but a new athletic director who probably wasn't around in 2003. But, you know, you had the Ansonia Naugatuck, you had the Shelton Derby. All of a sudden, we've got a Woodland Seymour. My wife, Elizabeth, is the one that decided, let's play it on
Thanksgiving
Eve, because I want you home for Thanksgiving. And she goes, and what makes you think anybody's going to come to Seymour Woodland when they've been going to an Ansonia Naugatuck or a Shelton Derby for years, you know?
Right.
So at the time, Chris Anderson was there. He's back now. Schools decided, administration decided it was going to be, and Chris and I made it as big a rivalry as possible.
Right.
I love Chris. He's a great young coach, intense
very
as
successful
I am.
there,
right,
too.
and very successful, absolutely. And as much as intensity as we brought to the game, we both enjoyed each other's company also.
Right.
But we felt that because it was a new kid on the block, we had to make it a I don't like you type thing. And we did. And we did it very well. And, you know, I used to, we got to go up to Goat Hill. That's what I call Woodland. Goat Hill, going up to the top. You know, he would go, we got to go up to the swamp, you know, in Seymour. And it has. There were some great football games played. I mean, Chris's early teams were just,
Right.
I mean, where did these kids come from? And then I'm saying to myself, why did
Seymour.
we open Woodland?
Yeah.
They'd all be here, or many of
Right.
them would be here because we had, quite a few good ball players that came from the Beacon Falls region. So, yeah, I think over the years it became a great rivalry.
I think especially the 2004 and 2005 seasons. The 2004, you're both playing for the league championship. I believe it was a Friday afternoon. The game had got rained out.
Yeah.
Woodland, at the last minute, I think with like a minute 30 to go, marched down the field. That was a tough loss. But then the following year, you guys are, I believe, 6-3 going into that game, and Woodland's on a long winning streak. And you guys pulled off a great upset at the Barber Field that day, or that night.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those 2 years alone, I mean, going to those games, it was so intense.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
And that reminded me of old-time Valley football because the fans were intense also.
Right.
When you went, whether you were going out that gate to go down the hill or coming up that gate to go in, okay, those Woodland fans were letting you know, who they were, which is great. I mean, I'm getting
Right.
goosebumps now talking about it. But there were some confrontations, right at the gates also.
Right.
But oh yeah, bring the wood. That was the
Yeah.
chant of the.
But that's what you want. You want a rivalry. You
Yeah.
want it to be that way. And I think that's something that's kind of lost now in a lot of programs is there's just not the same rivalries there once was because I blame social media too. I think that hasn't helped anything either. But
Right.
there was a time, me growing up as a kid, if you were seen talking to an Ansonia kid, you took a lot of heat for it.
Sure.
You couldn't, same thing with Seymour, I'm sure, if
Oh,
they were
yeah.
talking to a Naugatuck
Oh,
kid
yeah.
or a Derby kid. Yeah.
Right. And the first time I ever talked to Gary Lucarelli from Derby was we played in the Nutmeg game down in the University of Bridgeport.
Right.
I mean, we probably fought more than we ever played against each other. But and to this day, the Woodland came down once. I'm going to say it was Woodland and wrote, "Bring the wood" on one of our tackling machines or something.
Oh, really?
And
Yeah.
somebody says, "Coach, I'm gonna paint that. But don't you dare! You leave that there." And to the best of my knowledge, it's still there.
Really?
And then that's where that comes from. Bring the wood. Maybe one of my assistant coaches painted it on there just for the, to fire up. But I mean, those are the rivalries. I used to have a Derby shirt for the whole week, and that's what I wore at practice.
Wow, you wore a Derby.
Yeah, and then at the last day we'd put it on the tackling machine and get some of the greatest hits of ever, But I mean, you're absolutely right. Rivalries, to me, aren't what they used to be. Whether it's because one's success has become so good that it's hard for the other one to,
Right.
and nothing. I mean, George French is doing a phenomenal job with a number of bodies.
Right.
But for him to go across that river, or for them to come over, I mean, you're talking about, that'd be like Notre Dame coming to Southern Connecticut and playing. No offense to either programs, but
Right.
I mean, just the numbers that one has to work with.
And numbers
changed.
do play a factor.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it really does.
Right.
It's not to make an excuse, but it really does. It really hurts a program sometimes, because sometimes you're outmanned. You really
Right.
are.
And sometimes I think big programs don't afford some of the people that might become good football players. If they had the opportunity they might just need a little more coaching. But because of the numbers, the coach is able to say, well, I'm going to go with this one because, there were many days up in Waterbury that I'd say to the coaches at the end of the game, what numbers do you want to take home with you? Because there were some very talented kids.
Right.
But they just didn't have the coaching staffs to, get them to where they could be.
Right.
So there's something to be said about small programs because you have to develop the talent. So some of the good coaching goes on in small programs that turn out,
Right.
good teams, talented teams, where other coaches just have numbers that, just about anybody could coach them up right.
Right.
So, but No, rivalries are a dying breed. And I hope Seymour Woodland doesn't go anywhere but
No, I hope
Wednesday
not either.
night.
That really is a
up
great
on Goat
rivalry.
Hill or up in the swamp. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, back to '93, because it's going to segue into this next part. You beat Bloomfield in the state title game. It was a young coach by the name of Jack Cochran.
Yes, it was.
This is what I want to ask you about this and get your feelings. A lot of people will say the 50-point rule was brought in because of Jack, humiliating teams a lot. I think there was one game he beat a team 90-0.
Mm-hmm.
Give me your feelings on the whole 50-point rule, and do you think it's fair to signal out other programs? Because kids, that have practiced all week and they get in that game, how do you tell them don't score? They came to practice all week. They want to do good when they're out there.
Yeah, I'm from the school of I coach not to let you score, and I coach to score.
Right.
Just as you said, that young boy that's worked hard all week, all right, and this is payday, and this is his chance to go in.
Right.
Let him play football. It's football.
Yeah.
Now, if you're leaving your studs in there
Right.
in the fourth quarter with 4 minutes to go to beat somebody by 90 points, well, that's a whole different story.
Right.
But
that's where there has to be a difference in how you.
And there has to be a difference, and that starts on the sideline. Okay? Back to you saying I never had an ego. You're absolutely right. I didn't make substitutions. My position coaches made substitutions.
Right.
But before we made the decision, there was something that went on in a coaches meeting that said, if we're up by 21 points, you people have the right to put in whoever you feel deserves the right to go in from practice.
Right.
All right. Now, if we became 21-17, then it's back to my decision. But also, I don't want to see somebody out there on the field that hasn't done anything during the week. Okay, been absent 1 or 2 days, from school, because going back, you didn't go to school and not be to practice unless
Right.
there was some kind of legitimate. So I just believe kids should play, and Jack's being Cochran rule. Don't know exactly what he was doing
Right.
all of those times, but it's somewhat from that day at Seymour beating Bloomfield 42-12 at Southern Connecticut in '93. Jack didn't want to do the complimentary gestures at the end of the game because he felt I ran up the game.
Right.
I think it's quite ironic. Years later, it's the Cochran rule, 50-plus rule. But also, Jack Cochran is a phenomenal coach.
Right.
Outstanding coach.
And he's won titles with every team he's
Absolutely.
coached.
X's and O's. And most important, Jack cared about his kids.
Right.
I've talked to the Freeneys. I was there when he won the Super Bowl down in Miami with Jack. And Dwight Freeney has nothing but fatherly instincts, and it goes on.
Right.
Jack coached well.
And I think you two both respected each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We had our differences.
Right.
There's no doubt about it. When I went up to Bloomfield and I'm not sure when, to get beat by him soundly 56 to something, he wouldn't let our team in at halftime, for some reason. No, I have the utmost respect for Jack as a coach, for the simple reason that he really did care about his players.
Right.
Right down to the end. And what's ironic is my last game, I get beat by him, with his new London team.
Right. But he did a classy thing. I remember at
Oh, yeah.
midfield he gave you a hug and
Yeah,
congratulated.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I said, I told him at that time, because they could have punched one more in.
Right.
I said, thank you. He goes, no, that's for you. He goes, I didn't punch that in because it's you. He says, anybody else, I would have punched it in.
Right.
So.
Well, he was honest.
Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely. Day is long. He was honest. Yeah,
Right.
But, oh yeah.
I think another thing too, we were bringing up, running up the score and stuff. Something that this is the thing where the N.V.L. does have, good things they do, and there's a lot of things I like that they do. One of them was they kept the Kansas City tiebreaker, where the Hoosie after the '92 season got rid of the Kansas City tiebreaker, which I think a game should always be won. I don't think a tie is ever good, and we've seen some classic N.V.L. games. There was that Naugatuck-Ansonia game in '94 that went to overtime. What are your feelings? I mean, are you in favor of it, or?
No, they practice all week.
Yeah.
They deserve to be a winner or a loser. And I always said, fellas, if we get beat, that's fine, as long as we played our best game. I never want to lose a game, okay? So if I'm tied, to me that's losing a game. I didn't lose it to the other team. I didn't get beat by the other team. I lost it to some rule by somebody who's not even in between the hashes, So I believe that all games should be played out,
Right.
And sooner or later somebody saving the whale is going to say, well, the kids are out there too long. There's too many people outside of the game of football that are trying to make decisions for the game of football.
Right. Yeah.
It's like how do you slide into second base now? To me, baseball has been baseball for a long time. Now we can't take the shortstop out on a double play.
Right.
So yeah.
So now that 2007 team, you win your 4th state title. Mm-hmm. That's your 28th season. That's an impressive thing to do because it is not easy. I don't care what anybody says. You win 1, you did a great job because it is so hard to do. I mean, everything has to go your way. So to win 4 is extraordinary. You win that state title. Was there a part of you that said, you know what, this is how I need to leave? I won a state title. What made you decide to come back for the final year?
I wasn't sure about the next head coach.
Right.
I needed another year to evaluate that situation. I was never worried about when I left or how I left. I was worried how I was going to leave the program.
Right.
You had mentioned about Danny Dunay, possibly have been. Bobby Keller was right there with me to the end.
Yeah.
Eric had left and became the basketball coach that he is at Notre Dame of Fairfield.
Right.
And I was concerned, and I needed another year to evaluate Coach Lennon.
Right.
And that's what really it was all about. It wasn't about, do I leave now? Do I leave, with a state championship? How am I leaving it? Who am I leaving it to? Basically, at that time, Lennon was the guy that was on the radar, but I needed some more.
To be sure.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's what it was all about. And to be honest, the 2008 team was about as extraordinary as
right.
After losing what I lost with the 2007, those boys just simply, they knew it was my last year, and they played like it was my last year.
Right.
And never in my wildest dreams did I think from August that we would be playing the last day of the football season in 2008.
Right. Now, is there one particular championship that stands out, or are all 4 special in their own way where you don't like to compare them?
Probably the one that stands out is only because of the opponent being Darien,
right.
who was going for, at that time, a 14-0 season,
yeah.
which had not been accomplished
ever
yeah. at that time. We did it with a young man. I mean, in the other state championships, we had a quarterback who was a quarterback. We did it in 1998 with a junior named Matt Thomas.
Right.
Who Matt Thomas was our quarterback because simply we had no one else, and he did a phenomenal job.
Right.
And that probably is a tribute to the kids around him that allowed him to do what he could do, and Coach Keller made sure the whole offense was coordinated.
Right.
to his limitations. The combination of the opponent, the combination of the little pieces that had to come together, but they were all great. And like we've said, Mike, every kid that ever played to me was a champion.
Right.
Whether they won a championship or if they were all league or this or that, if they put up with me for 4 years, they were champions.
Right. Now, were there any regrets when you left? Did you leave with any, or did you leave, saying, I did everything I wanted to do? I could leave without any, regrets.
No, I have no regrets whatsoever. I was
Right.
I was blessed with good administration, good coaching staffs, parents that bought in to the program, and a community that was in full support. So I was the blessed.
Right. Now, Seymour, before I get to it, though, what was it like for you that spring when they opened up spring practice and you weren't going to be going to Springs that year? Was it tough, or were you?
Yeah, because my car was parked right back there, in the back end. And so I did a lot of grass cutting when the grass didn't need to be cut. Because let me tell you, for 3 years it was tough.
Oh, so it took about 3 years to get out of your system.
Yeah, it really did. And, as I said earlier, I wasn't going to have Tommy Lennon looking over his shoulder. If Tommy needed anything or his staff needed anything,
you were there to help.
I was there. But I was not going to say, you need to do it this way, you need to do it that way. I crossed the bridge, and now it's your turn to cross the bridge.
Right. And what I think is interesting, too, is, again, you won a state title your first year, but as you mentioned after that, you went through some tough times. You went with a winless season. So did Tommy. He didn't have the best first 4 years of his career, but the last 4 have been pretty good. And this past year, I think they went 10-1 or 10-2, whatever it is. So, the program is starting to get back, and I think that's the most important thing is the program took some bumps, but it's still Wildcat football. It's still going strong, and that's all you could ask for.
Absolutely. And Tommy and his staff will continue to, be successful. The kids are graduating. They're going on to school. Some of them are playing, but most of them are going on to school or finding, a job that they want to do. School's not for everybody. It's never has been. And probably the people that have to understand that the most are the parents. You got a good kid, you raised a good kid, and he wants to work.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly. What does this helmet right here mean to Paul Sponheimer, and what does it represent to you the most?
Looks a lot like the world. Once a Wildcat, always a Wildcat. The colors have never changed. They're blue and gold. Blue, gold. And when a young man puts that on, he should know that Paul Sponheimer is with him.
Right, definitely. To me, Coach, I just look at you, and 29 years is a long time. You're talking 3 decades, and it's like you said, you're giving a lot to Wildcat football, so sometimes your family misses out a little bit. So the work that goes into it, I think, like I said, the wins are great, the championships are great, but I think when it comes to you is what these boys got out of it, and they definitely walked out of there loving that program, but loving Paul Sponheimer, the man, more so than the coach, which I think is, what really stands out to you. What do you think?
You're absolutely right, Mike. Like I said, I have 2 beautiful daughters, Calla and Deirdre. I have a beautiful wife, Elizabeth. Those are the ones that made the sacrifices. And many people over my career said, "Don't you wish you had a son?" I said, "I had thousands of sons."
Right.
End of story. I had thousands of sons, and as long as they're out there being passionate about whatever they're doing, I'm a happy camper.
Right. And just the fact that, think about all the coaches that have coached with you too, and you said have went on to successful careers. And Coach Kello stayed with you right till the end.
Absolutely.
DeMarco was there a long time. Danny Dune learned so much from you. When you hear a Derby guy say, I'm in Wildcat land. You know right there that he got something out of it, and I'm sure, a lot of what he takes into football, today as the defensive coordinator for Shelton, he learned from you, what you taught him and stuff like that, and you see it every day with him, how he goes about himself. And I just think that this, to me, the thing you want most out of your school when you're having sports teams is you want it to be a program. You want it to be successful, but you want it to be a program. And this has always been a football program. Nobody could ever say it hasn't been. And I think that's what stands out the most is it's always been Wildcat football and it has never changed.
Right. Well, the key word you keep using is program. I always said we run a program, not a team. And,
right.
I think it continues today and will continue for a long, long time because the roots are there.
Well, Coach, I really appreciate this. This was a lot of fun. I could talk to you all day about this. And, I have a newfound appreciation for Seymour football. I think what you did as a head coach, what you did for these boys, is something that should never go unnoticed. I think you're a hell of a man. I really do. And I appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate taking the time to have me on and do your homework before we got on. And again, it's the Valley, and we're just part of it.
Exactly. Well, I thank you again.
Thanks.
Well, there you have it, folks. 29 years, 8 championships, 4 state titles, 2 Housatonic League titles, and 2 N.V.L. titles. That's impressive. It's unbelievable. But what Paul Sponheimer, the man, did for these great boys throughout the years is what will always stand out about this man. He wanted these boys to be men and to learn something and to understand that you can't take things for granted. If you want something to happen, you have to earn it, you have to be committed, you have to be dedicated. He was a football coach, but he was also a teacher too. And you could even go as far as to say he was a father to those boys as well. It is an honor to pay tribute to such a legendary coach, but even more a legendary person. For Hometown Heroes, I'm Mike Cannici. Good night, everyone.